Business has always been about turning a profit, making money. But can it stand for something more? Something beyond dollars and cents? We think so. We think that today, business has a higher calling, a purpose to be fair and just, to do right by their workers, customers, communities, and the environment. And it turns out companies successful doing that also do better for their bottom line. When you see the Just Capital seal, it means this company is a force for good. Visit justcapital.com to learn more.
Good afternoon. We are doing it live here in the 4 o'clock hour, 790 KABC, doing more in 2024, just like the financial markets. It's Mottek On Money, live on the air here in 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, stocks did end higher today after the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell took the spotlight again today on Capitol Hill, wrapping up his two-day testimony before Congress. Looks like the Dow climbed 130 points today to end at 38,791, pretty close to its all-time high, which it hit last week. The S&P 500, the star of the day, finishing up just about 53 points to 5,157, and that is a new record high close for the S&P 500. The NASDAQ popped nearly 242 points to finish at 16,273. All the major averages at or near record highs at this point. Guess what else went up today? NVIDIA shares up for the sixth day in a row. This has been the big story, of course. The AI giant racking up six straight record highs, as a matter of fact. We'll talk about that here coming up shortly as the AI-fueled rally continues. We also saw some of the other big tech names roar back. Later this evening, we'll hear from President Biden and also a simultaneous commentary from former President Trump on his social media platform. Today, the Biden administration laid out its plan to support home buyers and renters, which includes lowering the cost of buying a home and cracking down on so-called rental junk fees. But critics say it's only going to worsen the housing crisis. We'll, of course, be eager to hear what he has to say about all that and hear what former President Trump also has to say in reaction. It's Oscar weekend coming up here in Hollywood. Tomorrow we'll be speaking live with celebrity chef Wolfgang Puck, who'll be catering the Governor's Ball again for something like the 30th year. He'll be joining us live tomorrow evening. On this Oscar week, we see Oscar Mayer making an announcement. Looks like they are going to be coming out with a plant-based hot dog in the future. So looks like that parent company, Kraft Heinz, is launching a line of vegan-friendly hot dogs and sausages. Kind of cute that they mentioned this on the Oscar week. The price of gold has hit a record high again today. Checking it out right now, it's at $2,167.80 an ounce. Are you cashing in your gold or buying more? We're going to get a street-level view of what's happening in the real world out there with Elliott Salter, with Elliott Salter Pawn Shop and Loans in West Hollywood, probably the most famous pawn shop here in Southern California. Elliott Salter will be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works. Joining us live now, money manager Ken Winans, president of Winans Investments, market historian, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, and Forbes magazine contributor. Ken, great to have you with us here. Day packed with news here. Give us your reaction to this latest rally, which has propelled the S&P 500 to an all-time high.
Well, I want to get started on this plant-based hot dog, Frank. I'm a major hot dog fan. I love nothing more when I go to in old New York City, when I could go get a really good dog, and when I lived in Chicago, the Chicago-style dogs. But this idea of a plant-based hot dog, it is an L.A. product, and I have to tell you, though, as a commodity guy, I love it because that means that things like soybeans and all these other commodities will take off on that. But it is going to be an interesting 24 hours as we digest a lot of things. Admittedly, I mean, I make no bones about it. I'm a capitalist. I have a feeling tonight's State of the Union speech is going to be a somewhat hard for me to fathom, and that's why I probably will drink a lot of wine while I watch it, because number one, and most people haven't really thought about this, is about raising taxes. And not only are we looking at the possibility of what let's call them the Trump tax cuts expiring next year, but they're doubling down on raising taxes on, as they're calling it, billionaire taxes, corporate taxes, and we know that a lot of states, such as California, blue states, will follow suit. It's just getting awfully expensive, even for the rich, to maintain a decent lifestyle. So I think it will be interesting to see what comes out of that. But let me jump into something you brought up, and I think it's a lesson I have been trying to teach people over the last 3 or 4 days. You talked about gold. Now, all of us know the story of the tortoise and the hare. And when you look at what's gone on the last 26 months, when you look at in 2022, the S&P went down 19, the NASDAQ went down 33, gold even. In 2023, you had the S&P obviously pop back 24, you had the NASDAQ jump 44, you had gold up 13. You are now year to date, obviously S&P and NASDAQ are on a tail, but gold just hit a new high. Of those three, gold was the best performer. Boring. I mean, I admit, I'm the first to admit, boring, but stable. And I think that a lot of people need to begin to ask themselves, if you honestly believe the volatility that we have seen in the markets is going to subside. I don't think it will. I think that too many people are still trying to remember bygone eras of multi-year bull markets. And I think that era is gone, especially as we are looking still at inflation, as Jerome Powell talked about today. Although they might be lowering rates later in this year, inflation has not been conquered. And that's the telltale sign as we move forward. But again, I think what I would just suggest is a lot of people have way too much tech in their portfolios and they're underexposed in other areas. The moral of the story, maybe it's a good time to rebalance.
On the air live with money manager Ken Winans. And again, this happened during the financial crisis when inflation, by the way, we were told was pretty low. There were obviously a lot of concerns about what was happening in the entire financial system back in 2008. And it was around that time we saw gold finally make a big move to $1,000, I believe it was back then. And then it hit a record high during the pandemic. And here we are at record highs again. It's curious that this is happening at a time when we're told inflation is subsiding. What do you see ahead for gold here?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, you have to look at gold in two ways. Number one, there are a lot of central banks around the world that are seriously thinking about replenishing their gold stockpiles as there is concern about the dollar. Then you have a lot of countries in the world that actually do use gold as part of their daily lives. India, and they're all very large emerging economies, China, India, and they're talking about how gold demand is picking up there. And then lo and behold, there's been a lot of shortages of gold, especially out of Africa. You're just dealing with the quintessential shortage of supply. Demand is growing, and I also think what you just said. I mean, there are people. You're going to have a guest come on later, a pawn store gentleman in Los Angeles. I will bet you that he will tell you that people are coming in to buy gold because there is a general sense that things are still not right, and they don't 100% trust what's going on. I think it's a telltale sign about also what's happening in crypto. Why is crypto so popular? There's a general concern that fiat currencies cannot be trusted, stocks cannot be trusted, real estate. I think that tale continues to ring through. Whether you're a young investor or an old investor, people are broadening out.
On the air live with money manager Ken Winans, and it's interesting to see this play out again. It's just kind of human nature that when Bitcoin is making record highs, that's when people tend to pile in. Same thing with gold. I remember back in 1980 when gold was hitting record highs, people were buying Krugerrands back then. That was the thing to do, and now once again, people are buying gold at all-time highs.
Well, I would argue there's a little bit of a difference. I mean, Bitcoin and the other cryptos basically are mimicking what happened with the NASDAQ. I mean, they had a big pop, big drop, and then they had a pop back again. Gold has not had that. Gold has been very stable. I remember my mentor told me a very, very long time ago that gold will always be the price of what a good business suit costs. Now, granted, maybe you don't wear quite as many business suits as we used to, but I'll be darned if that's not about right. You know, a good business suit today, you're going to go down Rodeo Drive and you're going to want to pick out a power suit. It's going to cost you about $2,200 before taxes. And I think it's very true on that. But Frank, the bigger point is the fact that gold is not going down tells you that the truth is that inflation is still a nascent problem I'm of the opinion we're going to be dealing with it for several more years to come, especially when you're looking at the other end of it, the second act of the play, which is wage push inflation. I mean, those stories are all over the news today about people wanting more money. I think the strikes last year in the entertainment industry are a telltale sign of other strikes in other industries around the world that we'll be hearing about for the next couple of years.
And you mentioned at the beginning that you like hot dogs. You're obviously a true American. We'll find out if you like apple pie here in just a moment. But we'll be watching the State of the Union speech, and we're told that President Biden will escalate a crusade to tax wealthy Americans and large companies more in that State of the Union speech this evening, proposing to hike corporate minimum taxes and curb executive pay and corporate jet deductions. What do you think the market will have to say about that?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's an attempt to try to buy votes. When there's always the devil in the detail. And I think that for a lot of people in the audience that might hear these numbers and say, oh my goodness, these people are not paying enough taxes. Go talk to the business owners, go talk to people who run successful, but are far not anywhere near $1 billion. And when you read the language, they're talking about people who are making, bosses making $400,000 a year, where they will have to pay more into Medicare. This is not a billionaire tax. They're going after successful people. And I think that when you are looking at that, coupled with states like California, they will follow suit as they're in a massive push to raise revenues in the state. I think that number one, the migration of businesses out of places like California will continue. And I also think too that, I have, degrees in economics and business. And it's often been told that, and many people know this, the higher you raise taxes, the less money you actually collect. It's a well-known economic fact. And the fact that they are stealing and dusting off the playbook from the 1970s, and they're trying it all over again, which sadly going to be tragically the same consequences, is a reason why I think a lot of people are going to say, you know what, I might have to reconsider how I vote and really think long and hard about it. But to the listeners of this show, especially in California, you've got a chance to send a message to your elected officials in Sacramento. Don't continue to raise my taxes and my fees and my gas taxes and all the other things that you're trying to come up with. Why don't you try to cut expenses? A novel concept, but I think we have to start thinking that way, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. Government runs fat, and they need to start running lean.
And something I think that's getting traction here, the phrase vote different seems to be out there, and I noticed that on social media today. Now, get a load of this. The president's calling for Congress to approve far stricter limits on business income deductions for executive pay. And let's see, we'll also propose quadrupling a 1% tax on corporate stock buybacks, another revenue raiser approved that year back in 2022. Wants to increase to 21% of 15% corporate minimum tax on companies reporting over $1 billion in profit that he won as part of that 2022 so-called clean energy legislation. So he'll be laying it out, and it'll be interesting to hear what former President Trump has to say in real time as he's going to be doing commentary during the speech on his social media platform. Now we see NVIDIA on fire again today, hitting an all-time high. It's being called the Magnificent One. Looks like the Magnificent Seven has started to fall back, but we're seeing some of those names rebound today. Meta, for example. What about the Magnificent Seven and now the Magnificent One?
Well, here's the thing, and I'm glad you're bringing this up because I think it's the telltale sign when a group is getting rich. You're looking at Apple. Apple is down on the year. Google is down on the year. You're seeing a lot of the big tech holdings are not following through in this rally. And this is when you can tell that there's going to be some kind of just switch in leadership. People are going to look for other names to buy. I find it interesting that here we have this wonderful day in the S&P, and the two groups that did the best were basically service companies and industrial companies. They were not tech. They were not financial. They were not a lot of the groups that people talk about. There are these other areas that people are just simply shifting money to. My problem with NVIDIA is a fantastic company. It's obviously a company that is very dominant in everything we're dealing with, certainly in tech, but also a dominant part of what's going on in California. Their chips are affecting everything, whether it's entertainment or it's certainly in my neck of the woods up in the Bay Area, or for that matter, in casinos in Las Vegas as they're starting to do more virtual gaming. It's affecting everything. But here's the thing. At some point, every stock gets too expensive to own. And I'm not saying you rush out and sell your NVIDIA today, but nothing goes straight up forever. And so I think that the other tech sector is beginning to show signs of slowing down or retracement, as we call it. Maybe be careful about falling in love with a name and just be aware that they've had a heck of a run, and a little pullback would be healthy. But I mean, the fact that you have the rally, the leadership of the market changing, Frank, this is a healthy thing. If you want this rally to sustain itself, you can't have a few 7 stocks running the show. You got to have broad-based participation, and that is happening. One other quick thing. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about money is flowing back to the United States. The dollar is very strong right now, and it's interesting to have gold and the dollar both running very, very strong. Money is coming back to the United States. Money is coming from Europe, from the Middle East, from Asia. Look at the train wreck we better know is China. It's coming here. This could be the saving grace of our real estate markets, and certainly continue to have the stock rally continue on, and the bond rally while we throw it in there. So there are some green shoots showing up out of the winter thaw, and that's good for all of us.
All right, and before we let you off the hook here, Ken Winans, any specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be a bit of a bull here. I would suggest that anybody who's light on gold in their portfolios or generally commodities, they might want to take a good hard look. I don't think gold is necessarily going to pull back real hard. There's seasonal reasons for it as well. Gold typically runs very strong for the first 6 months of the year. And talking about some of these service names, let me throw a couple out there. And these are names that I guarantee people have never heard of. I doubt you've ever heard of Applied Industrial Technologies. They're a distribution company. This stock is up 47% in the last 25 months. It's up 7% year to date. It's tracking very well. It's a clean, easy, conservative company. I like that. And last but not least, I always laugh about it. We all see these trucks on the freeway, these Cintas trucks, the uniform trucks, symbol CTAS. It's a boring company. The CEO probably could walk into your studios and most people wouldn't even know who this person is. But the reality of it is these companies posted really good numbers. They're on track to have a good year, and I like boring. And these 2 stocks, I think, will continue to track well.
Well, you are never boring, Ken Winans. And before we let you off the hook here now, we have to ask you what wine goes good with hot dogs, which you're going to be enjoying this evening.
Oh boy. Well, I'll tell you what, you don't want to go
White
with
or
anything
red?
too hearty, especially. A red, I would definitely go with a red in the wintertime, a white in the summertime, but I would not go with a really deep red if you're going to be eating a veggie hot dog, something on the lighter side like a light Pinot.
Fantastic. You've covered it all tonight, Ken. Thank you very much for taking the call as always, and look forward to talking to you again very soon.
You take care, Frank. Good night.
Thanks again. Thank you very much. That is the one and only Ken Winans, money manager and president of Winans Investments, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, a terrific market historian, also a Forbes magazine contributor. Live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Folks, let's be honest. Sometimes we find ourselves or a loved one dealing with a massive injury caused by a terrible accident by no fault of our own. Sometimes it's simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We're all good at preparing for earthquakes and fires, but let's not forget to prepare in case we're involved in a major accident. It's critical to know who to call first. Clark Fielding became an attorney to help you in a crisis. Fielding Law is focused on justice and resources for you because they understand how the system works and what to do in the most horrific situations. I always say to put the Fielding Law team in your phone under the word accident, so all you have to do is hit dial. Believe me, you'll feel a lot better having set this up for yourself and your family. 833-88-SHARK is the number. Again, that's 833-88-SHARK. With the population exploding and increased vehicles on the freeways, be proactive. Prepare for the worst and expect the best. But if and when you do need help, call Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Again, that's clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes Herman's Hermits coming to the Canyon Montclair March 30th. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com. Right now, Herman Hermits fans, caller 9 wins 1-888-790-5222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Another winning day for the stock market with the Fed Chairman Jerome Powell back in the spotlight. No bombshell commentary today in his testimony on Capitol Hill for the second day in a row. We did see the Dow move up 130 points at 38,791, just below its all-time high. The S&P 500 popped 53 points higher, and it did attain a new record high close at 5,157. The NASDAQ up 242 at 16,273. The yield on the 10-year note now 4.09%. The price of gold edging higher to record highs of $250 at $2,167.80 an ounce. I'll be talking to Elliott Salter later this hour. He runs a big pawn shop in West Hollywood, probably the most famous pawn shop here in Southern California. We'll talk about what people are doing. Are they buying or selling gold with the price at a record high? We'll find out this evening. Also, President Biden set to deliver the State of the Union speech tonight, and taxes will be a big part of it. That is, of course, raising taxes, especially on businesses. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about it with Grover Norquist, America's leading taxpayer advocate, coming up here shortly. The price of oil moving up 30 cents at $79.23 a barrel, with more upheaval in the Middle East, which will also be discussed, we're told, by President Biden in the State of the Union speech tonight. Checking the cryptos now, we see Bitcoin down about 800 at 66,969. Ethereum up 12 at 3,888, and Doge at 16 cents. And now the latest news for you right here in 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. We are doing it live in the 4 o'clock hour right here in 790 KBC, right after Ben Shapiro every weekday afternoon, This program is followed by the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. So join Randy and others at 5 o'clock for a complete rundown of what's happening ahead of the President's State of the Union speech this evening. Of course, you can listen to us in the 4 o'clock hour live here on 790 KBC. We're also streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com, and then the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. We've had some important discussions this week on crypto, the markets. We talked to Rick Caruso earlier this week as well. So if you want to review any of the shows, you can go to KBC.com and bring up the Mottek On Money podcast. President Biden this evening, we're told, will escalate a crusade to tax wealthy folks and large companies more in his State of the Union speech, proposing to hike corporate minimum taxes and curb executive pay and corporate jet deductions. Speech tonight coming at a time when the president's approval ratings are pretty dismal, especially as it relates to the economy. Interestingly, former President Trump will be giving commentary during the president's State of the Union speech on his social media platform this evening. Joining us live now, America's leading taxpayer advocate, Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform, coming to us from Washington. Grover, thank you very much for taking the call, and set it up for us this evening, especially as what we're expecting on the tax front.
Well, what we have heard from the White House is that they're planning to endorse not just the European demand that we put a floor on taxes, so that Brussels and Paris and Peking, Beijing, would tell the United States how high your taxes are on businesses. They want to set up a cartel where the taxes in every country would be at least 15%. That's what the Europeans wanted. Biden's coming out and saying, you know what? It should be 21. Everybody should pay, at least the businesses have to pay 21%. And the United States cannot compete with China or Europe on lower taxes. We'll have to compete on lower wages, which is exactly what we don't want to do. We want to compete by having less government, less spending, fewer taxes, lower taxes. And he's going to say, no, we're going to have a cartel like OPEC was for oil, and government's going to cost the same amount in China as in France, and the United States will have to be just as expensive. And if you want to compete, cut your wages. This is a disaster the president's putting forward. It is amazing that he's putting it forward, given the success that when we cut the corporate tax, how much job creation we did, how we increased the median income by 6.8% in 1 year, 2019. 6.8%. That's a bigger increase in the median income for Americans than all 8 years of Obama.
On the air live with taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist, your advocate, listening to us here on Mottek on Money on 790 KABC. Now, I see the president wants to increase to 21%, that 15% corporate minimum tax on companies reporting over $1 billion. That was part of that 2022 so-called clean energy legislation. Also proposing quadrupling a 1% tax on corporate stock buybacks, another revenue raiser approved that year. And this also, as you mentioned, the proposals include the president's previous calls, by the way, to raise the corporate tax rate to 28% from the current 21%, recouping half of Republicans' 2017 cut. It'll be interesting to hear what former President Trump has to say about all this in real time this evening.
Well, one of the things, as you point out, that Biden wants to do is take the corporate rate on American companies to 28%. In China, it's 15 and 25. So he would make, by the law that he wants to push, every single American company and every single American worker non-competitive with China. 28% corporate rate plus the 4 that we have. We have state taxes as well, about 4, average 32%. That's higher than all the taxes in Europe. So we wouldn't be competitive with the rest of the world on how we tax American companies. People would invest in China, not the U.S., because we would have higher taxes than China, higher taxes than France. Who wants to have higher taxes in France? What is this? So this is very damaging to investment flows, which people will send their money to countries other than the United States to build factories and to build new businesses. They'll leave the United States. We had money flowing into the United States because we took the corporate rate to 21, lower than most of Europe, lower than most of the Chinese. He wants to take it to 28 to make us non-competitive again, like it was back when Biden was vice president and Obama was president. We have lived in that world, and it wasn't good.
Well, I do remember. And, of course, the economy appears to be the number one issue for voters here in California. Certainly immigration also high on the list, as well as inflation. What else do you expect to hear from the president, and what will you be listening for this evening?
I think when he talks about inflation, he will not remind you that every dollar in your pocket, every dollar in your paycheck is worth 18% less today than on the day that Biden became president. Inflation, year after year, added up to 18%, almost 20% increase in the cost of anything and everything you buy. And it makes the value of your paycheck less. This is a huge disaster. Now he's going to argue, well, but next year it'll get worse, maybe more slowly. And he'll try and tell you that's a good deal. But we've now learned that inflation is not below 6%, which they told us it was going to be, and not below 3%, which they told us it was going to be. So I think we're in increasing problems. Not good.
What is the buzz there in Washington ahead of this speech and the political mood of the moment coming off the primary election we had this week? And I've heard the phrase "vote different." That seems to be catching on.
Well, I do think after the primary elections on Tuesday, it is now going to be President Trump versus President Biden. Those are the two people running. There's not some question about whether something else could pop up there. So we now know who's running for president, and that's fixed. And that's what Biden will have to explain, that what he did made sense. And President Trump will have to get up and say, you know, I may be rough how I talk sometimes, but here's how I did in the economy, and you should look to vote for me. And they're gonna argue it out, and it'll be interesting to see whether will they agree to debate. Biden wouldn't debate during the primaries. Trump wouldn't debate during the primaries. Are they going to debate each other?
Grover, thanks for taking the call here. We do appreciate it and look forward to speaking with you again very soon. That is Grover Norquist coming to us live from Washington, President of Americans for Tax Reform, looking out for you, the American taxpayer. Grover, thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
This is Mottek on Money on 790 KBC. Thunderstorms, freak thunderstorms roaring across Southern California this afternoon. Let's see how it's impacting your traffic now here on 790 KBC. Mottek on Money continues here on 790 KBC. We're doing it live here in the 4 o'clock hour on 790 KBC. Mottek on Money, also streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and your on-demand Mottek on Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, the price of gold at a record high today. Yep, extending its record run-up this week. Looks like more bets for Fed policy easing, adding to tailwinds for gold from central bank buying, also safe haven demand. Consumers once again interested in gold, with the price right now hovering at around $2,167.80 an ounce. Silver also moving higher, just shy of $25 an ounce. Are people buying or selling these days? Let's bring in Elliott Salter now, who owns probably the most famous pawn shop here in Southern California in West Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard. He's been there since 1969. Elliott Salter, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank, for having me.
Great to speak. It's been a while since we've chatted behind live microphones, as we've seen gold hit record highs over the years, and then you see a lot more people coming in, either buying or selling. What are people doing, buying or selling these days?
People are still buying gold. They buy it as jewelry, and I do sell a lot of like ounce coins of silver, ounce gold. But people they're worried about the future, and gold and silver is a good hedge against that.
We're on the air live with Elliott Salter, and let me ask you this, El. You got a front row seat to the real economy out there. How is the economy doing?
The economy seems to be doing pretty well, Frank. People are always borrowing. They always run short of money, but I notice now they're picking things up faster. So they're not getting a loan and waiting till the end, but they get a loan, pick it up, and do their business.
All right. And what are people bringing in these days?
Well, they always bring in gold jewelry, silver bullion. I don't get much gold bullion like I used to. I think it all got melted down and turned into something else. But a lot of fine instruments, fine watches, cameras, a lot of video cameras. People borrow money on good things. Well, because I won't loan money on bad things.
Now, you've been doing this for a while. 1969, is that right? And have you been at that same location there? You've seen a lot in those years.
I've been at this store since 1969. I was up the street for 5 years, and then worked downtown with my dad for 10. So according to all that, I should be 104 years old.
And you've seen a lot of ups and downs in the economy. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm sure.
Yes, I have. And it seems to me like most of the ugly came from just when things got deregulated, the banks in 07 and 08. And the only people that did go to jail were the people who were on hourly wages. All the guys that made all the big bonuses, they kind of walked free. But isn't that the way it goes?
Mm-hmm. One thing that's come up, I've noticed at pawn shops, vinyl albums, right, made a big comeback. Do you have any of those there? And what are your thoughts about vinyl making such a big comeback?
Well, there's nothing like playing a vinyl on a good turntable. It's just amazing. And once you hear the difference, you go, how can I listen to a CD? And I got a vinyl guy here. Dave loves vinyl, and he's the one encouraging people to bring it in.
All right. You have any record players too then?
No. We do?
We have a couple.
We have a couple, Dave says.
Oh.
So we do.
Okay.
You.
All right. Well, that is good to know. And anything else vintage that's making a comeback there?
You never know. I mean, I'm always looking for the unusual, and two things. I like the quick turnover items, and then the unusual stuff can stay for a long time because it just adds to the ambiance of the shop.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And what about watches? Yeah, we used to talk to Kevin O'Leary quite a bit, a big watch collector, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. What's your message for Mr. Wonderful and the other watch collectors out there?
Well, I do get a few good ones. I've got quite a big assortment now of Rolex diving watches, or Stubbs and Submariners, and
I've got a Diamond President.
And a Diamond President. All really good prices, all guaranteed. People are always worried about Rolex being fake, but we give a guarantee with the serial number. And people know me. They shop from me. They come in and trade the watch in, get another one.
Now, how does it work nowadays for people looking for a short-term loan? How does it work nowadays?
Well, they come in with an item, bring their ID. We research it a little bit to find out what the retail is, and we loan them, a good percentage of that. And the rates are higher than credit card rates, but there's no late payment fees, and it doesn't hurt your credit. It doesn't my loans do not rely on your credit.
Well, terrific, Elliott. We wish you all the best and continued success here. It's going to be a big weekend, Oscar weekend, and gold at record highs. All reasons to stop by and say hello to you there on Santa Monica Boulevard. Elliott Salter, the owner of Elliott Salter Pawn Shop and Loan on Santa Monica Boulevard. It's great to reconnect with you, Elliott. Thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
You bet. Thank you, Frank, for calling. Call anytime.
All right. Thank you very much. And we see gold right now. Yep, you heard it, a record high. Just above $2,167 an ounce. Silver at $24.62 an ounce, so well below its all-time high, but it's been edging up lately. Coming up next, it's the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. This is Mottek on Money on 790 KBC.
What's up, folks? Anthony Armstrong here.
Bob Papa, along with Super Bowl champion Carl Banks.
Hey, NFL fans. This is Solomon Wilcox, former NFL safety and host of the Believe in Bengals podcast. Catch my show and all 32 Believe NFL podcasts. Listen in to former players give their inside perspective on your favorite team. Search Believe, that's BLEAV, on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast.
It's always football season, wherever you listen.